Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our 7th virtual meeting, a child safety town hall. Before we get started, I'd like to run over a few housekeeping items so you all know how to participate in today's event. First, we have some child safety resources listed on your screen, but if you or someone you know is in an immediate crisis, please call 911. Next, all lines are on mute. And if you have a question, you will have the opportunity to text them into today's presenters. Please type your thoughts into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send them in at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them throughout the Q&A. Similar questions will be combined, and inappropriate or offensive questions will not be unannounced. And please, due to time constraints, please keep all questions on topic. Now, if you experience any technical difficulties at any point during our presentation, please explain your problem through the chat feature, and we will try our best to address the issue. Lastly, we are recording this town hall, and the video will be available on our YouTube page within 24 hours. Please subscribe to New Jersey OAG on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Flickr for the latest updates on information, resources, and news from our office. Now I'd like to hand things off to our host and moderator today, Acting Union County Prosecutor Lindsay Rotolo.
Thank you, Whitney, so much, and thank you for your work in putting this together. Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's 21 Counties 21st Century Town Hall. My name is Lindsay Rotolo, and I currently have the privilege and honor of serving the people of Union County as their acting prosecutor. I want to give a special thank you to Attorney General Grewal for inviting me to serve as the host and moderator of today's town hall. For those of you joining us for your first 2121 project town hall, I want to give you a little bit of background. It was started in April of 2018 when General Grewal asked each of the 21 prosecutors to hold regular public discussions on issues relevant to community policing in the 21st century. Open lines of communication between law enforcement and the communities we serve are critical to effectively address the safety concerns of the public, and never has that been more evident than today. While traditionally held in person, due to concerns over the spread of COVID-19, in April of this year, these events went virtual. In today's town hall, we will be addressing child safety in the age of COVID-19. As all of us are aware, the global pandemic has forced all of us into our homes. As such, children are away from their schools, and they are spending far more time online and behind screens. The sad reality is that for some children, this means that they are now being targeted by predators online or trapped with their abusers. The core character of a community is judged and measured by how we collectively treat the most vulnerable among us. Those who work in the area of child protection and advocacy, those who protect the state's children from those who would do them harm, reflect the best of us as a society. And today, I am joined by 3 such people. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce today's panelists. Please welcome Carmen Diaz-Petty, the Assistant Commissioner of Child Protection and Permanency within the Department of Children and Families. Assistant Attorney General Erin O'Leary from the Department of Children and Families Practice Group within the Division of Law, and Lieutenant John Pizzoro, who serves as the commander of the Internet Crimes Against Children Unit within the New Jersey State Police. Thank you all for taking time away from your day conversation on such an important topic. For the benefit of our listeners, I thought it would be helpful to start today's discussion by giving a brief overview of your role and the work of each of your unique agencies. Assistant Commissioner, would you mind starting us off? Could you share a little bit of a description of your role and the work of your office?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today. This is a really important conversation, so I'm really happy to be able to participate. So my name is Carmen Diaz-Petty. I am the Assistant Commissioner for the Division of Child Protection and Permanency. So DCPMP, right, as most of you know us by, is part of the Department of Children and Families. So the department is not just about child welfare. So we do a lot of different things. Our vision is to ensure that all residents in New Jersey are safe, healthy, and connected. So, you know, for us, it's not just about, you know, preventing child maltreatment, but it's also about preserving families and doing what we can do to, you know, everything that we can do to help them thrive. So I'll just share a little bit about the different parts of DCF. So we have a division on women. You know, they focus on, you know, sexual assault services, DV services, shelters, right, things like that. We have an Office of Adolescent Services, and their focus is on helping youth in particular who are aging out, who maybe were in our foster care system, have turned 18, and you know, they work with them through till age 21 till they age out. We have an Office of Family Voice. This has been a priority for us to make sure that as we are looking and making decisions about our policies, about what services families may need, that families are at the table, that they are letting us know what it is that they need, so that we're just not making the assumptions that you know, they may need, you know, housing, or, you know, maybe they need education, or, you know, whatever it may be. The Office of Family Voice is also includes specifically youth groups. So we have some youth councils that are also, you know, will also bring in their voice into our work, as well as our resource parents and our biological parents. We have also the Division of Family and Community Partnerships. That is our prevention arm. We also have our Children's System of Care, otherwise known as CSOC. CSOC is specifically for youth and mental health services. Basically, you can get anything from in-home services to residential treatment services, you know, if a child's needs are more significant. So DCF serves over 100,000 people. Every month, we, and I say we, right, it's my division, DCPMP, serves about 40,000 children in home, about 37,000 children and families are served through CSOC. We have about 15,000 families that are currently receiving subsidized adoption and KLGs. We provide school-based youth services. We have about 4,000 children in foster care placements, which is one of the lowest in the nation. So we really, you know, for us, keeping children at home and preserving families is a big priority. And we have, through our prevention division, we have family success centers in all counties. And I had previously mentioned our domestic violence services. So I think that that's probably a pretty good snapshot of what we do.
Critical work for all the residents of New Jersey. Thank you so much. Erin, could I turn to you now with the same question? Could you provide a bit of an overview of your role and then also the work of the Department of Children and Families Practice Group?
Sure, absolutely. So essentially, I am a lawyer, one of about just under 150 who represent Carmen and her department as their law firm, if you think of it that way. Our deputy attorneys general basically have the obligation to represent state agencies, and the agency that I'm involved in is child protection, and I have been since the start of my career. And my job right now is, as a law firm or a lawyer for the agency, I spend a lot of time, the majority of our attorneys spend a lot of time across the state working with the Division of Child Protection and Permanency, because the bulk of legal work comes from the child protection actions that we can take from a litigation perspective. And so that would be anywhere from going into court and asking for court orders to protect children. And these are children we're speaking of really kind of separate and apart from the world of criminal law. In civil, it's really a question of whether or not a child has been harmed by a caretaker. And so, and the action that the agency takes from a legal perspective is action to protect the child from that caretaker. So as you can imagine, it's an interference into a fundamentally established right to raise your children as you see fit. So we spent a lot of time with Carmen and her social workers, who are the ones doing one of the heaviest lifts in the state of New Jersey in terms of a job title, working with the families one-on-one, and we would file different actions at their request. That would include removal of a child from their home. That would include request for court-ordered services. And unfortunately, it goes as far, if we're not able to achieve reunification, which is the agency's first goal, we move our litigation on to termination of parental rights. And, you know, as you can imagine, that's even a further step in terms of state action and interference with the family. But there's an obligation on the other end of that, really about making sure that children achieve permanency. And so that's the balancing act. That's the tightrope that DCPP walks every day. And we like to walk beside them. And, you know, we work together pretty well in terms of child safety. And, you know, really the question being, when we're talking about child safety in their own home, do we take action with the agency directly? Do we go as far as to remove? And you heard the assistant commissioner refer to the fact that New Jersey, as compared to other states, has many less kids in foster care, and a very deliberate attempt to work to keep kids at home with their families. But we also know that it's a balancing. That tightrope, that balancing is about the best interest of the child, as well as the parents' rights to raise their children. So our job is to work with those caseworkers to be able to present to the court why we believe it's in the best interest of a child, or a child's at imminent risk of harm, to justify a rather dramatic action of removing them from their home. It's a pretty rewarding job. And as I said, the workers in the field are the ones doing the heavy lift, and, you know, the lawyers are reviewing the paper. But it's a great job to be in partnership with the agency on.
Thank you. Turning now to you, Lieutenant. You serve as the commander of the Internet Crimes Against Children unit of the State Police. Could you share with us a little bit about the work of your unit and how you engage with other agencies throughout the state?
Sure, Lindsay, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. So what we do is we are one of 61 task forces throughout the United States. We're primarily funded by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency and Prevention, so an arm of the Department of Justice. So one of 61 task forces around the U.S., New Jersey State Police and our unit is actually the lead for the federal government in that aspect. So within that, we have 70 law enforcement affiliates within the state of New Jersey. Our purpose really is twofold. One is to investigate online child exploitation, cyberbullying, sextortion, and what impacts our children on these devices right here. And then secondly, it's awareness and prevention. So our task force basically goes out and tries to protect children on the online environment. And as you know, and especially with COVID-19, that is where all our children are. And as more people are on that, our job is basically to go out there and protect children and keep them safe.
Thank you. That segues perfectly into kind of what I'd like to cover next, and that is, in light of this global pandemic and the fact that so many people are home and online and virtual interactions have now become the mainstream, how has it changed your work? You know, Carmen, I imagine for you, a lot of your referrals come in from schools, and now with children not being in person, has that impacted the types of cases that are coming in and the numbers?
Yes, it has significantly. So just, thinking about the number of referrals that are coming in right now, those are significantly lower than right this time last year. And it's really been the same across the nation. So we're not alone in that. But just to give you a sense, in last year, March, so since last year, I should say, we've experienced a 30% reduction. In April, it was a 63% reduction in reports. And in May, it's been a 55% reduction. So it's really significant. And we know that that does not mean that there's less abuse or neglect, right? Because we don't know that. I think that it's likely that because we don't have, so generally the majority of our reports come from school personnel. And since we don't have kids in school, right, they're virtual, we suspect that it's probably that we don't have the same eyes on our kids that we used to, and so therefore, we're not getting the same referrals. We've really tried to get creative, just thinking about child safety and how we work with our partners to try to do that, because right, I think that everyone at this point is working virtually. We are reaching out to our families, via remote technology, and it's a tremendous shift. Right, so my training is in clinical work, and I always say, even when I'm having meetings, I have such a hard time because I miss like all the body language and right, like the environment. And so this is the same for our workers, and so you can really miss a lot when we're speaking to families via remote technology, right? We don't know whether or not, right, there's in a domestic violence situation, whether the abuser is standing next to that victim, coaching them. The same thing with children. So it's been very scary for us. It's been really challenging. One of the things that we did as soon as we learned that we were going to be working remotely, we were able to secure PPEs, right, the personal protective equipment, for our staff. As we know, and we've heard in the news how incredibly difficult it is to get those, and generally they're reserved for hospitals. We were able to thankfully get enough PPEs to put together a team of 216 workers that we called our COVID-19 response teams. And they were charged. We were able to, the state is broken out into 9 areas. So each of the areas have 24 response team members that covered the entire week, right? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week since March 19th. Now, we have 5,000 employees. And so, right, just so you can put it in context, right? I took 5,000 employees, and I got a call on Monday, and everybody was home on, by Thursday. So it was a lot. And so thankfully, the response teams they have been able to continue to go out on the reports that we've been getting and still do face-to-face visits. It's been, they've been amazing. They've been absolutely amazing. The stories that they have shared about the work that they do with families is really touching. For us, I mentioned before, preserving families together is just important. Like, it's really one of our biggest goals. And so you know, as you can imagine, with families and who are, you know, have been exposed or that have tested positive, it's been scary for our workers, but they're still going in. I mean, we had a really difficult situation up in Bergen County where the mother had been ill, and they had 2 young children under the age of 5, and the father, who was working full time, was trying to keep it all together. The mother ended up getting really critically ill and you know, had really passed away in the home. The police was called, they called and came to the home, and when they walked in, it was an absolute disarray, right, as you can imagine. So they called us, we went out, you know, the workers went in, they helped the family, the father, clean up the home. They, you know, brought in a service and disinfected the home. We were able to get their children to stay with family for, you know, the 14 days while the father quarantined. So it was just, yeah, it makes me.
Understandably so. It's an emotional time, and it brings on new challenges. So it's not just that you've had to get creative to continue the work that you ordinarily do, it's that you're finding that your workforce is being tasked with new challenges. Is that a fair assessment? Yep. And now with people, you know, things reopening, you know, it doesn't eliminate the possibility that parents, guardians might still become ill. Other than finding family members with whom children can stay, are there other mechanisms that you and your workforce are doing to keep families together in that really unfortunate circumstance? Yeah,
for the most part, you know, it's really around making sure that they have the medical services that they may need, and so, you know, the workers go out and really just make connections. We have our assistant family service specialists is a group of staff that we have. They generally do supervise visitation between parents and their children. And really what we've been using them for now is to go pick up groceries for families and deliver them, right? Go get, you know, to the pharmacies and get medical supplies, right? Whatever they may need. We've gotten, you know, they've become our like just our UPS or FedEx, right? Like this is our group. And again, right, it's just really been incredible how all the CPMP staff have really come together to support our families. We've been able to get the laptops, tablets, Chromebooks for families to help them stay connected. You know, we've provided where we can some financial assistance, you know, for different concrete needs to help people get through this really difficult time.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you and your team are doing. Erin, I know you work very closely with Carmen's agency. How has I imagine the pandemic has also impacted your work. Could you talk to us a little bit about how that is and what your attorneys are able to continue to do throughout it?
Sure, absolutely. You know, I would say first and foremost, similar to Carmen's story, and I think to a lot of people, all of a sudden we went from being an in-office group to, you know, and also an in-court group, frankly, a huge amount of litigation, to being home and trying to figure out which cases were going in, which weren't, which courtrooms were open, which weren't. And it was certainly a challenge. That said, you know, we work pretty closely, especially at the management level, with the different offices in our courtrooms. We have deputy attorneys general who represent the state agency. There are law guardians who represent the child and the child's interests. So they're not a best interest attorney, but they do represent the child's position. And also we have oftentimes defense counsel for every parent kind of separately. So there's a huge group of people None of us claim to be particularly tech savvy, particularly because I think we work for the state. So that's not something that we've transitioned to as quickly as perhaps, other industries. So our transition wasn't as smooth, but we figured it out, right? And what we know is that if we're removing a child from a parent, they have a right to be heard by a judge within a set period of time. And we had to make sure that that happened. And the courts worked very closely with us. We got on the phones, then we started to figure out video, right? And now we're talking to all of you out in your homes and in your offices, kind of keeping yourselves separate. So that work really changed. It changed in the sense that we did some of the basic stuff over phone, but we do trials. And as I'm sure you are aware, Lindsay, it's a very personal event. I was listening to Carmen talk about how it's very difficult to serve families when you're over a video. And our position was, and it was after the conversation with Carmen and the agency, that we didn't want to move forward on, say, termination of parental rights in a more informal kind of telephonic and or video format. Instead, we really put those on hold to try to figure out what was happening with COVID, how quickly were we going to be back, because it was our position that that's a fundamental right, and that we were actually in agreement across the board with the attorneys to say this is something that cannot go forward without a judge being able to see all the witnesses in person in their body language, or without a defense counsel being able to talk to their client, or frankly, without me being able to talk to mine. So we did a lot of last minute kind of technology rumbles. And I think really what we're trying to figure out through this whole thing has been the balance of interests, right? The balance of interests of the agency's ability to serve its families during this time and make sure that their workforce is safe, but also to be able to provide services to those people who are really being pressured and stressed by this COVID circumstance. And there goes the dog. So that's, that I would say is pretty much all I have to say right now. We'll let her go.
Thanks, Darren. Lieutenant, here in Union County, we saw a near doubling of our ICAC referrals in that first month after the issuance of the first stay-at-home order. Would you say, in your experience, does that reflect something you are seeing statewide?
Definitely statewide and definitely national. So what has increased, right? Screen time's increased. So when we look at numbers, during March 1st through May 23rd this year, we received 2,300 cyber tips from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Last year, during the same time, we received 760. So you're talking about a 200% increase. But it's not necessarily the numbers are skewed in a way. It's because more people are home and more people are sharing content. It's like, for example, if you have a viral video, so people tend to share viral videos. We're getting more age difficult where you have 16 and 17. The reality is that, especially now and even before COVID, self-production, which is the manufacture of children taking their own sexually explicit photos, naked photos, and then sharing them, has increased exponentially over the years. So now with everyone home and everyone being bored, it's very easy for children to be manipulated and groomed because of that. You got to remember that not only are your children home, but also all the adults are home. So while Carmen isn't seeing the rise because everyone's at home, the indoor behavior, which is all online because of screen time, is kind of insidious. So you don't see those. You don't see, for example, the bruises and battered and what happens because it's in a place where it's in a private setting. And that's how children are manipulated more. And then it's boredom. It's screen time, and as much as children are doing this, I mean, how many people out there are been watched Tiger King, for example, on Netflix? So anything along those lines, people are spending more time in their device, and that is resulting to more victimization right now.
I was gonna, Lindsay, if I could jump in.
Please do.
You know, I was thinking before the dogs started barking, I was going to say my pass to John was going to be a very personal one, in the sense that I have, you know, a 9-year-old at home, and she is spending a ton of time on social media and on FaceTime and that type of thing. But there's part of me that wants her to be able to have the opportunity to connect with her friends, and kind of, she's missing that social element of things. But she is spending a lot more time on her social media, and other than some hurt feelings, she's a pretty well educated, because of, I guess, what her mama does, about the different things that are on there. She did cut her own hair the other day, but I'll take that instead of her hopping on the internet. And really, you know, we are not on top of her all the time. And so when you say something like it's increased, I can personally see it happening, and I can see the opportunistic person out there kind of taking advantage of it. And I do wonder about that.
And there's another reason from that, from just a neurological standpoint, is because we become addicted to our devices. So it's like dopamine dependence, right? Like, followers, and views. That's what everything has come about. And that's where you have to do something more outrageous the next time to get followers. I had an 8-year-old who shared sexually explicit videos, who now turned 10, said the reason she did that is because she didn't have enough likes, so she had to do something. So now add that to a pandemic where everyone is craving for contact. This is what makes our children very vulnerable.
John, you said a term that's used in the industry, but for any listeners who are not professionals, you use the term grooming. Could you talk a little bit about what you mean by that? And also, for all the parents and adults listening, are there behavioral indicators that a child is being groomed that we should all be on the lookout for?
Sure. Grooming is the subtle art of manipulation for children, in getting children to trust. And anyone can be groomed in order to do something. And generally, grooming was, giving someone a like who didn't have enough likes, commenting on how they're beautiful, giving them gifts, giving them games, anything to really garner trust in a child. So what happens today, especially for predators that are out there, they'll groom 50 to 100 children. Their idea is they're going to keep at it, and they're very patient. And whether it takes 3 days or 3 months or 3 years, they're going to be very persistent in doing that. But it's even the game stuff. It's the insidious stuff that parents don't know about. Like, for example, if your children are playing Fortnite, there's skins, and you can get various virtual currency to buy something. It's the Amazon gift cards, stuff that parents don't really realize that's happening, because even in the game platforms that children are being groomed. I'm sure your children has Xbox, or whether it be at Sony PlayStation, they all have chat features. So again, you have adults that are going to spend time manipulating them. And once they get them manipulated enough to trust them a little, they are going to make sure that, don't listen to your parents. They don't understand you. I understand you. And they're going to use language. One of the other things that predators will do is they'll match the language, sensory language that children use. So what do we like to talk about most? Ourselves, right? So for a child, when they're hearing someone repeat the same words back to them, they found, wow, someone really understands me. And that's where children are susceptible. And what you want to look for as a parent is, you got to look for subtleties. Are they more withdrawn? Are they sitting at a table where all of a sudden their phone is out of view? Do they go to the bathroom, or do they go to a closed door once they hear a notification? Do they become very angry or upset when you ask certain questions? So it's difficult during this time because everyone is stressed. So you have to determine what baseline your children are, and just look for subtleties. And I tell parents, parents usually tell me, hey, what device can I put on my child to monitor? If you're in that regard, you kind of already lost. It comes down to communication. And even though these communications are difficult, you have to listen. And when your child says, well, I've been talking to someone I don't know, don't yell and scream at them, because that victim shaming is only going to actually cause them not to share more information.
I think you hit sort of the key preventative measure in all law enforcement is communication. And, the best way to fight crime is to prevent it. So for parents to open those lines of dialogue with their children and feel comfortable, because what we've found here is that a lot of times grooming will get to a level where there's a threat if, the predators convince the child to do something outside of their comfort zone and then uses that sort of as leverage to get them to go further in whatever it is they're attempting to have them do. And so then it becomes, if you tell a parent or guardian, I'll do X. And so for parents to have that kind of open conversation with children that, you could tell me anything, even if someone's saying they'll do something to me. I think it's really important to open that up for kids before it goes too far. Are there other tips that you would share while we have sort of a captive audience of people who are committed to prevention, whether it be online, or one of the questions that's come in from listeners is probably better directed to Carmen and Aaron, but I think all three of you probably have tips to share, and that is working with schools and teachers now that they're virtual. Are there specific tips you're giving them to help detect abuse that might be happening at home now, given kind of our current circumstances? So I don't know if someone wants to start, but what tips could we share, whether it be the virtual dangers or the home dangers, given the COVID situation?
So we have been working with the Department of Education, and we have been sharing resources with them, around how to identify the signs of abuse. What we've also done, which I think was somebody's really great idea, what is a digital QR code that like educators can actually put in their lessons or like in their Zoom or Google backgrounds, so that the kids are able to, like, if they put their phone over it, a series of like resources will come up so that they're able to reach out, if they need help. So, that's one of the things that we have done specifically with the school. And in addition to just providing them with a lot of the resources.
And I'm just going to add on to that, really, to what Carmen is saying, in the sense that it's really about how to get inside the house to let the child know that there are people who can protect them. And it's probably, for abused and neglected children, school is probably their lifeline, we've learned. So it is a scary concept. And I think a lot of, what we need to do is continue to try to think of ways to get inside the house. Because from that perspective, we know that's not why that's why our calls have gone down. We know, to an extent, right, that we're just not seeing the kids we should be seeing, versus, did getting stuck in the house with all your loved ones and the doors shut for hours and hours and economic stress cause something else, So I think all of those factors, kind of when you think about families and their needs, and you heard about their needs through Carmen, and what families are suffering from an economic perspective, that kind of add or layer to the challenges for parents, as it relates to kind of appropriately parenting their children, right? I mean, this schooling at home stuff, I've always respected teachers, so I don't have to be the one who said I discovered something through this process, but it's brutal and it's hard, and it's a power struggle with a kid to become a teacher all of a sudden. So I think all of those elements we all know are sort of layered at home. And to Carmen's point, these initiatives or interesting ways to try to get to kids, and the fact that the agency is still keeping in contact with their clients, even if it might be virtual in most circumstances, is a positive to try to keep a lifeline out there for them.
And that's one of the other things that we've done to support families, is to make sure that everyone has, the technology that they need, right? So, whether it's tablets or Chromebooks, there's, even if you have one, for most people, right, you have 3 kids at home, they're all trying to go to school at the same time, right? And so we really have been able to partner with a lot of our community agencies, right, just to be able to get those tablets and those devices out to families, whether it's phones or anything we could get our hands on. We just wanted to make sure that at least they had, right? Although as I'm saying this out loud, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because right now I'm giving them, this, access to a cyber world.
Another question that's come in from a listener is, what do we do if a family is not responding when school reaches out, or if no one is responding sort of to the attempt to get into the home? Has anyone encountered that during these past few months, and do we have sort of a way of addressing it?
I know from a cyber standpoint, I'm just saying from investigation, we're going out and investigating. So any complaints that come in, we're still doing what we're supposed to and going out there, COVID or regardless of what's happening. So to that respect, is that anything in a complaint where a child's endangered significantly, I'm sure everyone here is out there to protect that child.
Yeah, and from the child welfare and right, we have I talked about the response teams. They're still going out. They're doing the investigations, and then right, all of the workers are keeping in touch with their families via phone or virtual technology. So, and if one of the workers that is happens to experience that, right, that they're not able to get in touch with their families, then that is forwarded to one of the response teams who will actually go out to the home.
Do you have tips that you could share with the public at large to who might notice something and I'll use as an example, we had an incident here locally where someone was unable to use their technology because they were home with an abuser to contact the police directly. So they went through another social service that's provided by a municipality here in Union County. And the individual checking that email box noticed and took immediate action and got the police involved. But, there's certainly a benefit now that we're all looking out for each other with COVID. We also kind of need to be cognizant of the fact that we need to look out for each other and the children of our community. And if you see, it's the classic law enforcement saying, if you see something, say something. But beyond that, are there tips that the public at large could use to not step in themselves, but get us involved at the appropriate time? Specifically, some of the referrals that come in for ICAC, I would imagine, are from other people who are online and seeing something trend. Has anyone else encountered something like that? Or a tip that they could share in terms of how the public could be more proactive.
Aware.
Yeah, aware.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I think that, oh, go, please.
Okay, no, go ahead, Erin.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that, there are certain signs, but the idea is that, you don't have to know for sure. You can just be suspicious, trust your instinct, and I'll leave the specific signs to Carmen to explain, but trust your instincts and call, because it can't hurt to call and let, us try to figure out what's happening. You don't have to personally investigate it or something like that. And the other thing I was thinking about with COVID, and we hadn't discussed this before, but if we were not in the COVID time right now, right, this is the time of year where DCF, which they're probably still doing it, will be pushing out notices about being careful about swimming pools and about water, right? Right. We know that in terms of risk to children who are younger, like 1 to 5, I believe it is, it's one of the most dangerous things, right? So there's other things that are happening, right? We're starting to get out. I'm going to the beach in a week and a half. And, part of that work is going to have to remember, our everyday protection strategies. But in terms of noticing signs of abuse, I'll defer to Carmen.
I'll say one of the things that parents can look for too, specifically, is what apps do your children have? So Scout, Whisper, you got to remember that today technology, two things, is end-to-end encryption, which means that a lot of information that's on your phone is anonymous. Any person can just create any fake email they want, any fake app, but there's other apps that are more problematic than others. So what's on your child's phone? I think that's part two, is that noticing that if, for example, your child has two calculator apps, it's not because they really love math. It's because one is in a container where they can hide information in there. So when you say see something, just notice your child's online behavior as well, because if they're going on risky apps that are anonymous, like Whisper or Scout or Kick, the likelihood of them being victimized rises exponentially.
So it's really important especially during this time when we're so socially isolated, that we remember and think about the families that are particularly vulnerable, right? So, those are going to be families that have infants and very young children, particularly children that have special needs, because we know that those can cause additional stressors. Right, children are really limited where they can go now. So when you have, right, multiple children in one home, that's the recipe for, right, mine, not yours. So it's and our families that have histories of substance use, that they have a history of mental illness, check in on them, see how they're doing. If you see kids that, right, maybe look a lot thinner than the last time you saw them, right, that may be cause for concern. And sometimes, our families don't want to reach out, whether it's, they're afraid or they're just embarrassed, whether somebody lost their job or, embarrassed that they're not able to feed their family. There's lots of reasons, right? Ask, and then we have and I think we had sent you all the information with all of our hotlines, so call, right, like Erin said, even if you just suspect, there's nothing wrong with just calling, because really our purpose is not to go out and remove children. That is just not what we do. 80% of our families, of our children, are home with their parents, right? So for us, it's really about how do we help families stay home with their children.
Supporting them through this tough time. And I should just remind those tuning in that the documents you refer to are available in the handout section. There's something I'd like to quickly open to the group, and that is, as all of you know, in the end of last year, the general issued a directive creating the New Jersey Resiliency Program for law enforcement. And this really groundbreaking program is designed to equip members of law enforcement with the tools necessary to cope with sort of the unique stressors of their jobs, which benefits the safety of the officers as well as, by extension, their families and their communities. From talking to all of you and from the experience we have here with the team that does work in child advocacy and protection here in Union County, we see that this is a particularly emotionally stressful and mentally taxing job. It's a passion for all of you, of course, and a calling to do this kind of work, but it has its negative impact. Do you and your, aside from availing yourselves of the resources through the resiliency program, do you and or your colleagues have other ways that you cope with the day in, day out stressors of this work that you could share?
So one of the things that I could start with is that ICAC specifically, we're looking at very difficult content. We're looking at the worst content that you can ever look at, quite honestly. And having been in homicide and all different places, the horrors that you see stays with you. So what we have done, like here, is we have our own program where our grant actually pays for a mental health provider for our officers. We take breaks, for example. We don't put pictures, family pictures next to content that you would view, so you can't transfer one to the other and you're not thinking about it. It's de-stressing at the end of the day and not looking at those images, because regardless, it's for two things for resilience for us, is that the more it impacts you when you go home, it's going to impact your family. And yet not only that, but it's not going to make you as effective on a daily basis. So people ask us, they're like, well, how can you do what you do? But we look at it from a stance of, we see that a child that is saved and happy, not a child that is damaged. So it has to do with changing the narrative of how we go about do that. And I think that's part of the challenge, even with resilience, is proportionately, for you to be healthy and for you to make impact, you need to be the most healthy version of you. So what we do here and we do around the country is we spend a lot of time on that, because we can only do and help others as strong as we can make ourselves.
Carmen, I think you might be on mute. No, I was just, Carmen, we couldn't hear you. Do you mind saying that again?
Yes. No, I was saying that for child protection, staff health and wellness has been a really important focus. You know, you wouldn't really think it, but the child welfare workers that are going out into families' homes really see some very, very difficult things. And really, for all intensive purposes, they are first responders. And so we also have a program where we have a couple of things. One of which is we have retired division workers that serve as peer mentors, and are available like 24 hours, all year long, to be able to just, call, talk to existing workers, so they can share their experience. And it's somebody that they're able to connect with because they understand what it's like to be them. We also have, especially during this time, we have attached to this program, we also have clinicians that will make direct phone calls, and in particular during this pandemic and for our response teams, they're actually making individual calls to each of our staff, because we know it's so difficult and it's really exhausting for them right now. So so those are a few of the things that that we do on a regular basis and just enhance during this pandemic.
We're getting a little bit close to the end here on time, so I wanted to just give each of you an opportunity to offer any closing remarks before we sort of wrap up. Erin, do you want to begin? Is there anything you'd like to add for those in attendance?
I don't think I have anything that I'd like to add, other than to say that I think that this work is important work, and we all sort of have different roles. And I think one of the most important things during this crisis, this COVID kind of situation, is to remember kind of patience and professional courtesy, because we're all under a lot of pressure to try to figure out how to do things within the context of this new world, and in a field that was very human contact based. And so patience and kindness and dealing with each other professionally and with our clients professionally, I think is a special reminder that I'd like to close with. Thank you.
Thank you. Carmen, did you want to say anything in closing?
So, first, this is really hard work, and it's work that we can't do alone. So, it's thank you to all of our partners, because this has made a huge difference. We've really seen some great collaboration between different departments and different community agencies, and it has been extremely helpful for families. And for families, just a reminder, we're really here to support you. We want to make sure that you have the things that you need to be the parent that you want to be to your children. And, you know, please get our supports. There's a lot of things available out there for you.
Thank you. John, last but not least.
All right. Just real quick is we can't arrest our way out of this problem. And I think that's the challenge that we have. For example, in 2015, IPAC, we had 143 arrests. Last year, we had 384. Every year, it continues to rise as more and more children are online, and that's their virtual world. So it takes a village. And the more you can get involved in your children's life or see something or even have conversations, is that we're trying to make sure that our children are healthy and protected as much as possible. So we need everyone in order to do that. So that's it.
Well, I would just like to thank all of you, Assistant Commissioner Carmen Diaz-Petty, Assistant Attorney General Erin O'Leary, Lieutenant John Pizzurro. Thank you so much for taking time today. It was a pleasure spending time with all three of you, albeit virtually. But thank you for sharing your insights, your expertise, and really thank you for the work that you do. Thank you. Stay safe. Be well. To our listeners, if you've enjoyed this last hour conversation, please join us again on June 18th at noon when we will be having another 2121 Town Hall hosted by the Attorney General, who will be joined by Director Jared Maples of Homeland Security and Preparedness, Director Rachel Weiner-Apter of the Division of Civil Rights, and Chief Weldon Powell of the Division of Criminal Justice for a discussion on standing up to hate and combating bias. You can sign up and get more information on the Attorney General's 21 for 21 website. To everyone listening, thank you for the work you do, for your interest in this important subject, and we hope you stay healthy and safe through this trying time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.